Okay, in this quick tutorial we are going to make a Flappy Birds clone, and we're going to import a few sprites. We're also going to have the bars hopefully coming in some sort of random order, and we are going to obviously set things like backgrounds, and we'll look at running some sort of score in there as well. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to click on my sprites folder, and I'm going to right click, go to create, and then I'm going to click on sprite. So we're going to name this first sprite S player. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import a few of the sprite images. Now, handily, I've got a small folder somewhere here. Here it is. So this little folder here has some sprite images in it. So you can see I've got a yellow bird. So I'm just going to drag that down a little bit. Click, drag, and drop. Let me just get rid of that for a second. Now it gives me a little bit of a warning. Are you sure you want to import these sprites? Yep, click on yes, and you can see my sprite is imported. Now, by default, these images are rather small. I'm running on a fairly high resolution screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to resize all of these three images. So if I click on, if I click on edit image here, and then we go to image, and then resize all frames, what we can do is we can change it to be a certain size. Now you can, by default, it's set to pixels. If you've got a percent as an example, you can up this to 200% as an example there. And if I say linear interpolation, click on apply. Now it looks really blurry, but trust me, it's basically double the size of it. So when you zoom back out, it's not too bad. So although it's still relatively small, it's only 68 by 48 pixels, that'll be enough for this type of game. Okay, so we've done that. Now I'm going to click on the close there for S player sprite, and I'm also going to just change this origin here where the collision is going to hit. So I'm going to say middle center, and that is pretty much done. Now if I click on the play, let me just zoom this in a little bit. If I click on the play, what you'll notice is the little bird there is flapping quite quickly. So we need to stop that, and we need to slow it down. So I'm going to just adjust my frames per second there. I'm going to use 6. So basically what that means is every second it's going to play 6 frames. Well, you can see there we've got 3. So basically this animation will play twice every second. So if we click on the play there, you can see that's not too bad. Now if you wanted to, you can up that a little bit. So if you want to do 12 or 24 or something like that, you can change the values there. So I'm happy with how this is. So let's close it, and let's make an object. So let's right click, go to create, and go to objects, and we're going to call this O player, and we're going to then select the player sprite by clicking on the sprite option there. Go to player, and we're done. Now, I'm not going to put anything in this at the moment, but what we are going to do is I'm going to put this directly in my room. So if I double click on the room and just drag my object on, and let's play this, see what happens. Lovely. So we haven't done much already, but you can kind of see there now my object is flapping, and it's happy there. Now it can't move because we haven't set anything to move yet, but you can see the animations play within the room. So that's a good start. So let's close the room, and let's add in a few more things. So back in my images here, you can see I've got a background, and I've got my base, and I've got a few other bits and bobs here. We've got the pipes, so we're going to look at importing these now. So the first thing I'm going to do is right click on sprites, go to create, and then we're going to create another sprite, and this one's going to be called S background. And I'm going to go to, I'm just going to drag this image in here now really quickly. So that's my first image there. Now you can, if you wanted to resize it, it's 512 pixels high by 288 pixels. I'm probably going to keep it, I tell you what, let's edit it slightly. If we go here, let's go to the image, and let's go to resize all frames. So let's make this image, say 700. Now what you will notice, because I've got this maintain aspect ratio on, if I change one part of this, and click in the other there, it'll maintain obviously the sort of structure of our image. So if I click on apply there, great, that's done it. So let's close. So I know my room is going to be just over 700 high because I'm going to be putting the bottom part on it. And let's add in another one there for the base. So if I right click on sprites, go to sprite, and we're going to call this S. I can call it base or floor. I'm going to call this floor so I know what it's doing. Drag that in, click on the S, and there we are, we've got that in, which is nice. Okay, so I'm going to just click on, to be honest, I don't need to change any of the markers in there. So if I close that, that's done. And let's close that background as well. So if I go back to my room, double click on my room, you'll notice on the side here, I've got layers on the right hand side. So if I click on my background layer, by default, it's set there to color black and no sprite. So if I click on my no sprite there and we select our background, you can see now my background's added in, which is quite nice. And what we can do is we can tile it. So I can tile it vertically or I can tile it horizontally, or if I really wanted to make it awful, I could stretch it out. So let's tile that there because it's a nice repeating pattern, and let's just see what that's done. So there we are, we've got the start now of our game where we've got the background in. We're now going to look at putting the floor into the bottom, and then we're going to look at adding in gravity and getting a little bit of movement there as well. Okay, so what we can do is we've got a horizontal speed and a vertical speed. So let's say, for example, we wanted the background to appear to be moving. So if I do this as a, say, -5 as an example, if I play that, you can see there now the background appears to be moving. Well, I say appears to be moving. It looks as if it's moving. It looks as if my little bird is actually flying and the background's going there. Now, -5 may be a little bit quick, so we can change that and we can make it a little bit smaller, and obviously that'll alter then the background speed for you. Okay, so let's add in another object called floor. So create object, and we're going to call this S floor. And we're going to then select the sprite object. Oop. Sorry, I should have called it S floor. I need to call it O floor. So click on sprite, click on floor. There you are, that's okay. And let's go back to our room, and we're going to just drag that into the bottom. Now notice when I try and drag this in, it comes up with a little X. I know it's quite small on the screen here. That's basically telling me that I can't drag it into a background layer. I need to be on my instances, or I need to create another instance. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create another instance, and we're going to rename this instance, and we're going to call this floor. And I'm just going to drag this down a little bit, and then make sure I'm on my flow instance, and we're just going to drag that in there. And it doesn't matter if it's slightly off the thing there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. Now I'm going to change my room width ever so slightly. So if you notice, my room is 1366 wide, so let's change it to 800, see what that does. There we are, that's enough. I'm just going to drag that out a little bit more, and that'll be okay. Right, so far I've got my player, I've got my floor, and we've started to animate the background, which is great. So let's add something called gravity now to our player. So what we're going to do is double click on our player, and then once we've done that, we're going to now look at adding in our gravity. So we are going to look at clicking what's called a step event. Now a step event happens every step of the game. So in our game at the moment, it's set at 60 frames. So every step will obviously run 60 times. So if I click on add event, let's click on step and then begin step. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for the gravity option. Now you could, if you want to manually make this, but I'm just going to use the inbuilt gravity for now. So I'm going to set that at a force of 0.5, and let's play, let's see what happens. So hopefully now what you should see is my Flappy Bird just falling out of the sky. Gone, lovely. Okay, fantastic. Right, okay, so our Flappy Bird now has fallen. Obviously we haven't put a collision on yet, so if the bird does hit the bottom here, it's not going to do anything, but you can see the gravity has worked. So let's add another thing. what I want to do is basically when I press the space bar, I want the bird to go up. I want a little bit of vertical speed put on him. So I'm going to click on add event, and then we're going to go down to key press, and then we're going to look at space. So what this does is it's basically a key press event. So every time I press the space bar, something is going to happen. So what we want to do is I'm going to look for my speed option. I'm going to drag that in, and we're then going to say we want vertical speed, and because we want it to go up, we're going to have to put a negative figure in, and I'm just going to put -7 there for now. So if I just play this, just to show you what happens. So every time I press the space bar, you can see it's going up, and then the gravity is still pushing me down. So this now is the first part of our game nearly set. Okay, let's close that, and that's great. So what's the next thing we need to do? Well, the next thing we're going to look at is getting our bars in. So I'm just going to close everything. Now, really quick trick for you. If you wanted to close everything to make everything look quite nice, if I right click on here, go to Windows, and then close all, it makes the workspace much neater. So I know I've got everything there ready set to go. Okay, so we're going to now add in some bars. So I'm going to right click on my sprite there, and I'm going to go to create sprite, and we're going to call this S bar or S top bar, and then we're going to import the image. So I'm going to just drag this image in. Now you'll notice this bar is the wrong way around. Right, so this is actually the bottom bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the image editor inbuilt. So I'm going to click on edit image, and then we're going to go to images, and then we are going to flip. So we're going to flip all frames, and you can see now that's gone the other way, which is good. So I'm going to close that one, and then we're going to do the same thing then for a bottom bar. Now what you can do if you want to do, you can just copy that, but we're going to add in another sprite instead. So right click, create sprite, and let's call this one S bottom bar. And then again, we're just going to import this image, and this time we don't have to flip it because it's the right way around. Okay, now we are going to change the origins on this, but we'll do that later, and I'll tell you and explain to you why we'll change it later on. Right, so far I've got my sprites. Let's create a few objects for these. So if I go to create object, and what I'm going to do is click on object, and we're going to call this one O bottom bar. Just select then the correct sprite. Just going to click close for that for the moment, and then let's create another one, and we're going to call this O top bar. Okay, so let's close both of them, and what we can do, and what some people do, is this: they just drag in a load of bars. Now, one thing I just want to be wary of, I'm not spacing these out properly at the moment, and I'll explain to you why. So if I just drag in the top bar there at the moment, and the bottom bar, what some people do is they basically add in a number of these. So if I copy it and paste it, and then basically they'll have a load of bars outside of the room. And then what you can do is with the bar object, I'm only going to do it with the bottom bar at the moment, but you can basically say this. So add event, create, and then we can use the speed variable, and we want it to be horizontal speed -5. So what you can see happening now is those 3 bars will obviously appear to be moving. And that does work. The downside with using that methodology is that you would obviously have to have a finite number of bars. So if you can imagine, this is my world. You could, if you wanted to have all these bars, if I just drag these over here, so you could, if you really wanted to, just have in loads and loads and loads of bars, move them over, and you can have all the bars here, and then that would appear as if everything is moving normally. But we're not going to do that. We are going to try and make these bars appear at a random point in time. Right now, to do this, we are going to use something called an alarm, and we are going to use an alarm every sort of few seconds. Right, so what will happen is the alarm will basically trigger, and then one of these will move in at a certain angle, and then once that's gone, another one may be then made at the top, and it'll drag over and so forth. So I'm just going to delete all of these just to get rid of them, and then we're going to start making our alarm. Okay, so we're going to now get our bars to move across our screen. Okay, so to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new object, and I'm going to call this one Game Manager. So right click on object, go to create, and then click on object. So I'm going to call this Game Manager, and you'll notice I've just typed this in directly here, and it'll set the name now when I press enter. You can see there it's done, and we are now nearly ready to go. Now, the reason I've made a new game manager is because the code that I'm going to be putting in here is going to have influence on a few different objects. It's going to influence our bottom bar, our top bar, and another object which we'll create later on to work out our points. So what we're going to do is we're going to use something called an alarm. Now, an alarm is an event which can happen at a specified time. So I'm going to click on add event, and we're going to go to alarm, and I'm going to start with alarm 0. So this first part is essentially my first alarm. So we're going to start by adding a random number. So I'm going to say get random number, and you'll notice it's the dice event. Now you can see mine's at the top because it's recently used, but if it's not there with you, just look on the bottom and it's under the random. So I'm going to click, drag and drop that in. We're then going to make a whole number, so an integer, and we're going to give it a value of between 5 and 100. Now you can change these values. We'll play around with them later. And then we need to make a target variable, and we're going to call this one top bar. Now you notice I've just typed top bar in. This is a random variable that I've just made here now. It's not an object or a sprite, so leave it at that. We could make it temporary if we want, but I won't need to do it for this moment in time. So what we want to do then is we want to create a new instance, so a new object on our canvas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the next one, which is create instance, which is the light bulb. What we want to do is I want to create a new object, so we're going to do the top bar first. And what I essentially want is it to be in a certain position. Now, if I just open my room for a second, there's a built-in variable called room width, which automatically gets the width of the room. Now, although we've set ours to 800, to be dynamic, I'm going to use the variable room underscore width. And what we're going to be doing is this. We are going to be if I just drag one of these in really quickly, we're going to be making the object outside the room, and then it will appear to be moving out, and then when it goes outside the room again, we'll just remove it, we'll delete the instance. So the idea is we could, if we wanted to, just create the object randomly here and then have it move in, but it's nicer really to make it outside the room and then have it appear to move over. So if I go back to my game manager, so we're going to create a new object. We're going to use room underscore width, and then I'm going to say plus 10, so that means it'll make it 10 pixels outside the room. And we're going to use the Y variable top bar. Notice I've used top bar with a capital B because I've used capital B here. Now, where do we want to place this? Well, we don't really want it on our instances layer because my Flappy Birds on there at the moment. So I'm going to create a new instance layer, and I'm going to call this one, if I right click on it, rename, I'm going to call this random bars. Press enter. And I'm going to go back then to my game manager. And when we put the layer, let's change that to random bars. Notice if you've used capital B or capital R as an example, you have to then obviously do the same with that. And then what we want to do is set the alarm. So we kind of, once the alarm is repeated once, we then need to reset it again. So we're going to look for the set alarm countdown. because we want this really to run every sort of 60 seconds. I say every 60 frames every 1 second. So I'm going to change that alarm 0 to 60, which is good. Now we need to start the alarm off, so we need to create an event. So if I click on add event, go to create, and then we're going to set the alarm again. So again, it's alarm 0 after 60 frames, and then we should be nearly ready to go. Now when we play this, nothing's going to happen. In fact, I'm not going to play it yet, and I'll tell you why. At the moment, the code there should work, but what will happen is the object will be made, but it won't move, right? So the object will be made, but it's not actually going to move and not going to do anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up my top bar, and I'm going to click on add event, create, and what we're going to do is just add in speed, set speed. I want horizontal, and we're going to set the speed to -5. So that then should mean the bar, once it's created, will start to go across. So there's one last thing we need to do before we play this game. We need to make sure the game manager is on our room. So I'm going to double click our room, and I'm going to drag the object game manager on. And you can see I put this in the top left hand corner. It doesn't really matter where this goes. The reason I put it there is essentially so I can keep track of it. You'll notice there is a question mark that it's that it appears as. The reason being is there's no sprite attached to it, because we don't need a sprite attached. It's going to run things for us, and it's basically going to make instances of our object here. So let's play that and see what happens. Okay, so our Flappy Birds are gone, and you can see the bars now are appearing, and they are appearing completely random. I haven't dragged a load of bars in outside the room. These bars now are appearing as the random number generator is built in. So you can see that has worked quite well. So the next thing we're going to look at doing is creating the bottom set of bars now for this. So I'm going to open my game manager back up, and what we're going to do is we're almost going to duplicate this create instance event. So if I drag that down, so instead of obviously the object being top bar, we're going to build a bottom bar, and the room width is going to be exactly the same. So room width plus 10, so we want it to be made outside the room. And what we're going to do for the Y is we're going to say top bar plus 500. So what this will do is it'll put 500 pixels between the top and the bottom, and we're gonna then say for it to be on the random bars. Now this isn't going to be exact, we're gonna have to play around with this variable for a moment. So let's just see what that does. So let's play. And we're up. So Flappy's gone, and you'll notice now the bottom bars are coming in, but there is a very slight issue. The issue is these bars aren't perfectly aligned, which isn't brilliant, but we can change that very, very, very easily. And you can see the bars are on top of our little floor as the floor goes past. So let's sort those two problems out. So the first thing is going to be quite easy to fix. If I double click on the bottom bar, then this sort of anchor point here at the moment is set to the top left. So if I set it to say top center or even middle center like the other one, let's play that. So Flappy's gone. What you'll notice is these now are much better. Now you'll notice they are the width there is always going to be the same because they are going to be up and around. You'll notice they are a little bit higher than what you would expect, but don't worry because the floor now is going to be moved in front of these bars. So these bars now are randomly being created, which is great. So there was one that was a little bit too high, so we may need to change our variables here in a moment. I don't know if it's going to happen again because these are all obviously being randomly created. So that was very close. Very, very, very close. So what we can do is we can set the minimum. Oh, there we are. Look, you can see it there. So we can set the minimum height. So let's change two things here. Let's go back to our game manager and let's set the minimum now to say 10 pixels. And what we're also going to do to sort that issue out where the floor is underneath the bars, I'm going to take the floor layer and just move this up and put it above all of our instances, because it doesn't really matter that it's there. So let's play that. Okay, so Flappy's gone, and you can see now the bars are lovely and they're perfect there as they are, which is great. So the next thing we are going to look at in this game now is putting collisions in with the bars and obviously the floor then to run an event, obviously when this happens. Just before we do that, let's double click on the bottom bar and let's add an event. So when we when we are outside of the room, so with the bottom bar we did this with the top one, so when we're outside of the room we want to destroy that instance, otherwise we're going to have a build up of bars. We don't really want that. We don't want instances if they're not in use, we just want to destroy them. So that will make our program a little bit slicker. Next on the list are collisions. So when we play our game, what we want, if I just replay it, what we want is that when our Flappy Bird is going, so when he's or she is going, we want to be able to go through here no problem. But if we hit one of the green pipes, we want to at the moment restart the game. Now we will do something later, maybe in another video we'll see, where we have a score coming up, but essentially for now what we want to do is have some sort of collision event. So let's get to it. If we open the O player and we go to add event and then we go down to collision object, if we collide with the top bar first, so if we collide with the top bar, what we want to do is we want to restart the room. So you can see that's added in there for us, and we can do exactly the same then. So add event, collision object. If we do the bottom bar, we then again want to add in a restart. So the way you find restart, if you start looking for just restart, you can either restart the room or restart the game. At this moment in time it doesn't matter. I'm just going to put restart game in there just for us to play around with. So you can see I'm flying here, no problem, and we're making it great. But let's see what happens when we hit one of the green bars. Bam. So you can see it start again. If we try this again, it just restarts there for us. So we need to put a collision in for the floor as well. So if we click on object player again, add event, collision object, floor, and just for now we're gonna restart the game as well. Lovely. So we've got now our collisions working. So what we are now going to look at is our score counter. So in order for us to have some form of score counter, let me just open my room. What we want is if we had our, in fact, let me just drag that on to here temporarily. So if we have our bars here, what we want is something in the middle here, so that when our little Flappy Bird goes through, so when it goes through the gap, we count that as a collision and we increment the score by 1. So ideally the easiest way to do this is to draw a object, or rather a sprite, and assign it to an object so that when that's counted as a collision, then it'll increment as 1. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a new sprite. So I'm going to right click, create sprite. Let's have a look. And what we're going to do with this one, we're going to click on edit image. We're just going to make this really, really small and thin. So if I go to image, and then we are going to resize all frames, and I'm going to untick this maintain aspect ratio, and the width is going to be something like, we'll do something really small, like 5, and the height we'll say 150, right? In fact, I'm just going to go up to 200 with this, just in case we need a little bit more to play with. Okay, so in fact, no, let's go more, let's go 300. So I'm going to click on apply, and you can see now there's a really long strip. So let's click our pink bucket, and I'm going to click on pink. So we've got now a strip which stands out. Now, if I close that, let's call this S score. I tell you what, S score. Let's call it S score count. And let's then close that. In fact, to be honest, it doesn't matter where this origin is. If we put it in the middle center, that should be fine now. Okay, so let's go for our object. So let's create a new object, and we're going to call this O score count, and that is essentially pretty much done. So let's select the sprite, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put this into our add this into our game manager. So again, we've got these instances, so let's create another instance. I put it in the middle there because that's like our little sandwich. So what we're going to do is we're going to have that as the score counter. Again, we'll have these set up in exactly the same. The only difference we're going to have on this one, ever so slightly, is that I'm going to change the way that this works on our y-axis. So at the moment, we have our top bar. So I'm going to have top bar, and I'm going to say plus 200. Now I might need to change this, right? I might need to change this, so we'll see now what that does. So hopefully our score counter should start to come in. Nope, you can see it hasn't. Now the reason it hasn't is because I haven't set the object to move across. So again, if I double click on score counter, click on add event, create, let's move that along. Let's use the speed, horizontal -5. Now that should work. There we are. So you can see that's coming in now. Good. Right. Excellent. Right. So what we now need to do is, if I make this invisible, so if I detick this visible, it'll still be there, but we won't be able to see it. So our little objects are still there, and Flappy can go through it, but we can't see it, or the game doesn't show it to us, but it is still being generated and it's still being there. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a collision. So we're going to basically say when our Flappy Bird collides with our object, we're going to add some points on. Now we can do it in two ways. I'm actually going to do it a slightly different way. So I'm going to go to score count. So I'm going to say add event. So when we have a collision with the player, so notice now I'm doing this in slightly the opposite way, it'll still work. So when we collide with our player, what I want to do is I want to first of all destroy that instance. And if I don't, every time the Flappy Bird goes through it, it's just going to keep on adding 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to add in a new variable, and I'm going to call it score. Now there is already a built-in variable called score, so that's fine. So I'm going to say 1, and I'm going to make that what's called relative. So what's going to happen is every time we hit one of those pink bands, 1 will be added to the score. Now if I detick that, I'll tick out, what it'll do is it'll always set the score to 1, so it'll never increment. So by adding relative there, it'll always add in score. Now what I'm going to also do is I'm going to use the debugger here. We're going to add the debugging, and the debugger is going to show us the variable score. So, no, not that one, score. Now what's going to happen is at the bottom here we've got the output. We should see the value score just incremented. So let's play this, and we'll see then if everything's right. Okay, so keep an eye on the bottom here. So I'm going through the first one. Look, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, 5. Lovely. Okay, so you can see that's working quite well. Although I can't play this game that well, but you can kind of see there that's working. Now our score doesn't actually reset to 0, so we can sort that out in a moment, but you can see that's working quite well. Okay, so first of all, let's go back to our player. So we need to go back to our player object, and what we're going to do is, in fact, we're not going to go back to our player object. We're going to make another object because I want to display the score. Now, in order to display the score, I'm going to make a points manager. Now, in order to make the points manager, this is going to be relatively sort of easy. What we're going to do is we're going to use something called a draw GUI event. So in fact, I can probably do it in my game manager. Yeah, let's keep it all in one game manager. So if I click on my game manager, and we go to add event, and then we're going to go down to draw, and then draw GUI. What I'm going to do is we are going to have a score variable appearing. So if I go to draw value, so I'm looking for draw value, which is this one here. You can see it's got caption, value, and then where you want to put it. So if we put it here, just as an example, and we say score, and then we use the value as score, the variable score. What I want to do is I want to put it on the top, so room width divided by 2. And then what we want to do is I'm going to put it sort of 10 pixels down, so it'll be from the bottom. Again, we may need to change this value to see obviously how it works. Let's play. And you can see there, look, score is now at the top there. And as I go through this, it is incrementing. Look, 3, 4, 5. And it's a little bit small, so let's sort that out. Now, what we can do is we can use certain types of fonts. So I'm going to make a font on the top here. I'm going to right click on fonts, go to create, and then we are going to go down to font, where that is, font. I have loaded in a font called Flappy Birds. So if I font Flappy, and let's look for it here. It'll be under F, I would have thought. Oh, I thought I'd loaded it in. Maybe I haven't. Okay, so I thought I'd loaded a font in called Flappy Font. Let's open that. So it definitely is there. Just install it. Ah, right, so it's randomly on my system called 04B_19. Yeah, okay, so I think that's already there. Yeah. Okay, so 0B4, there it is, perfect. What we want to do is we want to make it quite large, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. No, that's about 40, that's fine. So that's good. We've got our size set there. We've got our font set there. Font Flappy is going to be called. For some reason, it's giving it a weird name. Let's close that. Let's go back to our game manager and let's now add in a few more things to this. So what we want to do is we want to set the font, which is here. So I'm going to set the font to the Flappy font. I'm also going to set the alignment. So if we look at, there we are, text alignment. And what I want to do is H-align and V-align. So H-align is going to be center and it's going to be on the top. And then obviously that's there. So let's have a look. Let's play that. Let's see what it's done. We might need to change the color in a moment. We'll see. Oh, that's okay. So you can see my score now is at the top. Hey, and it's there. It's working quite well. Look. So every time it increments, it adds. The downside is, at the moment, when the game restarts, it doesn't reset the score, so we can sort that out now in a moment. Let's look at our player. So what we can do with that is we can basically say when the player is created. So we've got a create event there. Look, let's set our variable. We'll set score to 0. Not the most elegant way of doing it, but it'll work, I'm sure. Let's have a look. So score 0. There are 1, 2, 3. Oh, there we are. And we've reset and it's gone back down to 0. Okay, so that's our score done for that one. So for our last part of the game, we are going to create some sort of overlay, which is going to basically happen when we end the game, and we're going to create another room just to have a little start there before we actually run the game. So we'll probably look at doing that first. So let's first of all start a new room, but before we do that, let's rename this room to we'll call this game as an example. And then we're going to create a new room. So right click on rooms, create, and then we're going to create another room, and we're going to call this start. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the home position on this. So we don't want our game to start directly in the game. We want it to start on the start. So if I click on this order here and then move the start to the top, you can see this home there means that it's going to be the first part of the game. Now, as you probably recall, in the game I set the height and the width to 800 by 768. So I'm going to do the same there. So 800 768. It's currently black at the moment, so let's add in let's click on background. Instead of no sprite, we'll use the same background sprites we've used before, and let's horizontally tile it and stretch it out a little bit there. Okay, in fact we probably won't need to. We can probably add in our floor. Floor's not going to really do anything on this one, so if I just click on instances, drag the floor, there we are, that'll be fine. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add in a play button in the top here. So I'm going to add in a sprite, and where's my sprite? Where's my sprite? There it is. So we're going to call this play button. Should call it S play button. And I'm going to add in 2 frames. Now you'll notice there's going to be a slight difference to this one. So if I click on this one here, play button, drag that in. So that's one of them. And we're going to add in another one now in a moment. So if I drag the other one in. So the difference between these is one has an outer glow on it, the other one doesn't. And the reason being is what I want to do is when I hover over with the mouse, I want that one to view, whereas when it's normal, I want that one to be viewed. Okay, so we'll have a look at how we do that in a moment. Let me set the frames per second to 0 because I don't want it moving all the time. I don't really need to change the origin of it at all. So that is pretty much done. Let me close that one and let's go back to my start. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a new object. In fact, I've got one there, so I'll just delete that one because I don't need that one anymore. So if I right click, create, and go to object, and we're going to call this one O play button. And we're going to then go set the sprite to play button. It's great. And I'm just going to drag that one on really quickly to my start bar here. So play button is there. Lovely. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to basically change the instance. So when I hover over it, it's going to do something. So the way we do that is if I double click on the play button, we're going to add an event, and then we want to look for mouse. And what I want to do is mouse enter. So when the mouse enters, we need to change, it's the frame of the sprite. So if you look here, you got to set instance, set sprite, set instance scale, set alpha. In fact, if we do here, set sprite, it's the same sprite, but we're going to be setting frame number 1. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that because we're going to do when mouse leave. So mouse enter, and then let's do mouse leave. It says mouse, it's mouse leave. We're going to paste that in, and we're just going to go back to frame 0 here. So let's just try that one out really quickly. Let's play that one. So you can see there's my game, and you can see as my mouse enters, it glows, so it's acting like a rollover. When my mouse leaves, it doesn't. Now I could have done the outer glow a little bit better than this, but it was just really quickly just to show you the purpose of this. Now what I want to do is when I click on that play button, I want the game then to start. So let's go back over here, let's add an event, and let's say when mouse left pressed, so when I press the left key on the mouse, what do we want to do? Well, we want to go to the room. So I use this one here, which is go to room. Now if you can't see that, go to room. It's under the rooms, and you can drag that in, and we're basically going to say we want to go to the game. So if I just try that for a second. Press play, there you are, that works, and then it restarts the game entirely, which is fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. Now at the moment the game just ends without us seeing our score, so really what we need to do is show our high score for a little bit. So if I now close that, and in fact what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close everything at the moment, so right click Windows, close all, and then we can start then by looking at our game, sort of high score game now to go for. Okay, so far our game plays well, and what we're going to do now for this last part is have some sort of screen coming up when the game ends. So to do this, I'm going to add in a game over object, so I'm going to call it game over. And what we then are going to do is we are going to add in a new instance here, instance layer, and I'm going to call this GUI. So this is going to be my graphical overlay. So if I go back here to my image over, what we're going to do is we are going to add an event. Then we're going to go down to draw GUI, and we're going to add a few things in. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in some sort of color overlay. So if I click on set draw color, so if I grab a set draw, so set draw color at the moment is white. Let's change that to let's go for a light shade of blue. Blue is quite nice. I click on OK. And what we can also do, we can fade that out a little bit. So if we wanted to set the alpha, so draw alpha, so we'll set that instead of 1.7, say, as an example. So that'll be slightly see-through, which is great. And let's go to draw in a rectangle. So you can see here we've got draw rectangle. Now 0, 0 is the top left corner, and then right bottom, and there it needs to be in the bottom corner, so it covers the whole thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to say room width and room height. And I'm going to fill that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a font on there. Now we need to change the color of the font, otherwise it's going to be blue again. So I'm going to use another paint bucket, and we're going to leave that as white. That'll be fine. We're then going to add some text in, so we're going to draw a text value. Now again, I'm just going to make sure it's centered, so I'm going to drag that in, and we're going to set the font as well, because the font is going to be using the Flappy Birds font that I've used before. So the font Flappy, and then the H line is going to be set to center, and vertical line can be left to top. Let's draw the value in. So the first part is your score. So I'm going to say your score, and then we're going to use the value of score. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that in the middle. So I'm going to say room width divided by 2. And then we're basically going to say room height, let's say about 40%. So it's going to be 40% down. Now we also need to give some sort of instruction what to do when the game ends. So let's drag that in, and we can say something like press enter to restart the. Now I would use escape, but the screen recording software I use, when I press escape, it stops the screen recording, so I'm not going to do that. Again, we're going to use the same width there, and the height is going to be ever so slightly different, so I'm just going to copy this for a second, and we're going to change that to 0.6. So that basically will mean it's 60% down the screen, and that one's going to be 40% down the screen there as well. We now need to set up an event, so that when we press enter, the game goes to a certain room. So let's go to add event. Let's go to key pressed, enter, and let's then say restart the room. So we got to go to room. So go to room, and I'm going to go back to my other room. Now you can do this in a number of different ways, right? You don't have to do it in this way, but I've just basically got to restart there for that. Okay, so in that looks okay. so far, I think. And what we now need to do is we need to alter one of the collision events. So in the bottom bar, as an example, normally we restart game. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an instance of the game. So, sorry, instance of the object. So if I click on that object and then game over, there you are, and that then is going to be placed on our GUI layer, which I've made there. So if I change the layers here to GUI, that should be enough. Now basically when I crash into the bottom bar, this should appear, fingers crossed. Okay, so there are, my rollover still works. Let's play. 1, 2, there we are. Good. Okay, so let's crash into the bottom bar. Oh, now then, you've seen that did come up very, very, very quickly, but then it kind of went. Now the reason for that is in the background the game is just restarting. So what happens is Flappy Bird is just going down and down and down. So what we ideally need to do is back in our game over, where we draw the GUI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to destroy the instance. And I think destroy instance, and I'm going to set that to our player. So that's 1, 2, that's enough. Bam. Okay, so you can see there is a bit of an issue there. It's gone over the screen a little bit. Now we can do one of two things. We can either add another GUI box in here, or I could, if I wanted to, make the font a little bit smaller, or I could even widen the room a little bit. But you can kind of see what this is supposed to do, and when we press enter, then it obviously restarts the game. So in total, that is how we make Flappy Birds with a score counter and random bars. If you've liked it, please leave a comment.